Chapter 22:12, Untitled. Many people looked as disappointed as if their parents had died. Other people tried to cover it up, but the look on Ranmil's face was too obvious. No one responded to her words because it was the truth. There's an ancient technique attached to the soft armor known as the South Sea technique. Emperor Wu narrowed his eyes. The man who once ruled this continent inscribed it himself. The man who once ruled the continent. The one who was too powerful to be named. Everyone fell silent. Did His Royal Highness give Feng Wu the soft armor, then? She didn't just stumble upon it herself? Ranmil asked jealously. Empress Dugu said grumpily, the Crown Prince has always had the soft armor. How could Feng Wu just stumble upon it? Ranmil was silent. Emperor Wu gave her a meaningful look. Ranmil didn't dare utter a word. Meanwhile, on the other side of the crystal ball, the man was still punching Feng Wu. He pounded Feng Wu's stomach with his fist over and over again. His formidable fist was covered with golden light. Thump. 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 He gloated as he punched her. But he failed to notice that with each punch, he lost a little more spiritual essence while Feng Wu gained a little more. As the people watched, they shouted inwardly, "Stop. Stop now." Because the longer he hit her, the more power she would gain. He was feeding Feng Wu's spiritual essence at the cost of his own. He had practically turned into her energy source. Ranmil gritted her teeth. She almost wanted to shut down the crystal ball because she didn't want to see Feng Wu being so successful. But she didn't want to give up because she believed that things would turn around eventually. That stupid man. How had he become a level 6 spiritual lord when he was such an idiot? Keep punching Feng Wu, and he would turn her into a level 6 spiritual lord. Ranmil wasn't the only one who was frustrated. Neither Master Dugu nor Lord Mu enjoyed watching it either. No one would be happy when their enemies got stronger right in front of their eyes. But they couldn't remind the man. Until the man finally realized something was wrong. Although Feng Wu had been shouting nonstop, she didn't seem affected by all the punching at all. He, on the other hand, felt his spiritual essence being exhausted. He realized what was happening. He stopped and stared at Feng Wu. Why are you still not dead? He had punched her at least 100 times. With all the power he had used, he could have killed a level 7 spiritual lord, let alone a level 5 spiritual lord. But Feng Wu was still alive. Although she had been yelling, it was so exaggerated that she sounded like she was faking it. Moreover, she had just caught his hand and pushed him away. He glared at her. Feng Wu straightened her clothes and looked at the man with a smile. The man was shocked. Not only wasn't she dead, she also didn't seem injured at all. Chapter 22:13, Untitled. You're unscathed, the man said in a shaking voice. Feng Wu crossed her hands behind her back and nodded with a smile. That's right. The man's eyes widened. You're neither dead nor injured, and your power. A rumbling sound came from Feng Wu at that moment. The man's stomach lurched. He was only too familiar with that sound. It was the sound of a breakthrough. As expected, under the man's gaze, Feng Wu became a level 6 spiritual lord with little difficulty. The man's eyes almost popped out. That's impossible. He gritted his teeth. How can you make a breakthrough now? Did you use up the seed of the spirit source? Feng Wu grinned at him. I guess I owe you a big thank you. The man glared at her. What do you mean? Feng Wu said casually, I wouldn't have been able to make such rapid progress if you hadn't punched me so many times and given me all that spiritual essence. The man wouldn't believe it. Ridiculous. You did it by using the seed of the spirit source, didn't you? Feng Wu smiled. I can't waste it like that, can I? Why should I use it when I can use your spiritual essence? The man shouted, I don't believe you. Feng Wu smiled. Believe what you like. You're a level 5 spiritual lord now. That shocked the man. When he checked his body, he drew in his breath. That was why he felt drained. It was because he had dropped to become a level 5 spiritual lord. How is this possible? How could his level drop? The man was no longer a level 6 spiritual lord. He shouted, "What did you do to me?" Feng Wu shrugged. "You gave me the spiritual essence willingly and helped me make a breakthrough. Why are you blaming me now?" The man gritted his teeth and bellowed, "I didn't." Feng Wu smiled at him. He suddenly had a realization. Was I helping you when I hit you? Did you absorb my spiritual essence? That explained everything. That was why he had to gather more spiritual essence with each subsequent punch. It was you. He stared at Feng Wu. You're a witch. You. At that moment, Round Face finally arrived. Seeing him, the one with the iron hook shouted, "Hey! This girl." Thump. Feng Wu struck him before he could reveal her secret. The man fell and couldn't get up. Blood poured out of his mouth. He wanted to speak but couldn't utter a word. Seeing his teammate fall, Round Face was furious. Chapter 22:14. Untitled. He was so frustrated. How careless of him. They shouldn't have split up. Otherwise, his teammate wouldn't be injured like this. Are you a level 6 spiritual lord now? When he examined Feng Wu, he realized in frustration that she had made a breakthrough again. How unfair. The man bellowed. You were only a level 7 spiritual elder when we entered the woods, but you've risen all the way to a level 7 spiritual lord now. You're not human. Feng Wu only chuckled. Round Face shouted, "We should have killed you right away." Feng Wu laughed. Regret your decision now? The man said, I do. Fortunately for me, you've only just made the breakthrough, and your foundation isn't solid yet. I'm more skillful than you and can still defeat you. The man with the iron hook almost spat out another mouthful of blood. He wanted to tell his teammate to run while he still could. Feng Wu would never lose to someone of the same level. He wasn't alone in this. The people who were looking at the crystal ball all felt the same. They wanted Round Face to run away now and stop feeding Feng Wu more spiritual essence. However, the man with the iron hook was too weak to speak. And Round Face couldn't hear the people on the other side of the crystal ball either. He had no idea that everyone thought that he had no hope and was very confident in himself. Die. He made his move. And what was Feng Wu doing now? At an angle that Round Face couldn't see, Feng Wu grinned. She repeated what she had done to the man with the iron hook. She ran away from Round Face before he caught her. Shit! The man with the iron hook couldn't speak, but he could still see what was happening. He wanted to scream when he saw what Feng Wu was about to do. He hoped that his teammate would be smart enough to see through the trick. He had to be. Many people looking into the crystal ball wished the same. Stop feeding Feng Wu. She was already a level 6 spiritual lord, and she still had the seed of the spirit source. However, one's worst fear would always come true. Thump, thump, thump. Round Face was thrilled when he caught Feng Wu. What did I say? You've only just become a level 6 spiritual lord. There's no way you can beat me, a veteran. The man with the iron hook kept spitting out blood. That girl was faking it. Because he had been cheated once. The audience also knew that Feng Wu was pretending. Round Face was the only one in the dark. Feng Wu also provoked him further. Chapter 22:15. Why am I level 4? Fine, you've caught me. So what? You don't dare hit me. She said it on purpose. Of course, the man was provoked. He smirked. Why wouldn't I? You're going to be in a lot of pain. Thump, thump, thump. He then started punching her. The people watching on the other side were speechless. They watched in silence as Round Face attacked Feng Wu. Thump, thump, thump. He punched her over and over again. Of course, Feng Wu had to look like she was in pain. With each punch, the man was sure that he could kill Feng Wu, but no matter how loudly Feng Wu screamed, she just wouldn't die. The man was confused. Why won't she die? Aren't I using enough strength? He exerted more power. Thump, thump, thump. His punches were even heavier now. He thought that Feng Wu would die, but she was still alive. He didn't know what to do. The man with the iron hook looked at him in frustration and said, "Stop." That was all he managed to say. Stop? That infuriated Round Face. He turned to glare at his teammate. Why are you pleading for the girl? Hearing that, the man with the iron hook was so angry that he lost his strength to speak. He kept coughing. Round Face snorted. I must kill her today. Even the master won't be able to stop her when she grows stronger. With that, he started punching Feng Wu again. The man with the iron hook was almost in tears. No. But Round Face only punched Feng Wu harder. Until Round Face asked the same question his teammate did. What's happening to my spiritual essence? Why am I a level 5 spiritual lord now? Why are you still alive? The man with the iron hook found his reaction idiotic. On the other side of the crystal ball, Ran Mill and the others also thought that Round Face was the biggest fool. Feng Wu only smiled at him. Do you want to keep punching me? Round Face was speechless. Feng Wu said, Go on. The man shouted, Shut up. Thump, thump, thump. He punched her again. While he panted from throwing punches, Feng Wu smiled at him. Thank you so much. Thank you. Why was she thanking him? He was feeling utterly confused when Feng Wu made another breakthrough. Again. You're a level 7 spiritual lord now. How? Round Face looked like he had seen a ghost. He examined himself. Why am I a level 4 spiritual lord now? Chapter 22:16. Untitled. Round Face looked at Feng Wu like he had seen a ghost. He examined himself. Why am I a level 4 spiritual lord now? The man with the iron hook lowered his head and didn't want to say anything. The people around the crystal ball didn't want to say anything either. Round Face stared at Feng Wu in astonishment. But why? Why aren't you injured? I hit you as hard as I could. Why isn't there a scratch on you? Feng Wu grinned, but she still wasn't entirely satisfied. The spiritual essence Round Face could provide her became thinner and thinner, and she wasn't able to rise to level 8. At that thought, she complained to Round Face. It's all your fault. I couldn't rise to level 8. Round Face was speechless. He wasn't stupid. After all the strange things that had happened, he finally realized something. Did you absorb my spiritual essence and use it as your own? Are you a witch? He gritted his teeth. He looked from Feng Wu to his teammate and asked the man, Did she do the same to you? The man nodded. Why didn't you tell me? Round Face was furious. Why? The man said helplessly, I tried. You wouldn't listen. He was still coughing out blood and looked very weak. Round Face couldn't remember when the man had tried to warn him, until he searched his memory. So, that was what you meant, he sighed. But it was too late to regret now. Feng Wu shrugged. Now you know. The two men turned to Feng Wu in unison. What do you want? Feng Wu said matter-of-factly, I can't afford to waste time, but I'm patient enough to tell you why you're going to die. Shouldn't you thank me? After that, she finally made her move. Round Face wanted to run, but he was too late. Feng Wu caught him with her right hand and grabbed the man with the iron hook with her left hand. You can die in peace now. She smashed their heads together, killing them instantly. The two assassins were finally dead. Feng Wu heaved a sigh of relief. The audience around the crystal ball was astonished. She was a spiritual lord now. Those two men had both started off as level 6 spiritual lords, but Feng Wu had managed to kill them both. Since they started watching through the crystal ball, Feng Wu had killed 3 level 6 spiritual lords. That was incredible. Ran Mill stared at Feng Wu with bloodshot eyes. Right at that moment. Chapter 22:17, Untitled. Right at that moment. When Feng Wu got out of Mirror Lake, she saw a man standing in front of her. It was none other than the spiritual king whose identity Feng Wu had guessed. However, with the black scarf over his face, no one else could tell who he was. He narrowed his eyes, and there was a malicious look in his eyes. especially when he saw that Feng Wu was alive and dead bodies were floating on the surface of the water. He stared at the 4 bodies in disbelief. He recognized their black clothes and black scarves. There were 3 level 6 and 1 level 5 spiritual lords. But Feng Wu was a mere. Wait. The spiritual king's pupils contracted when he looked at Feng Wu. He shouted, "That's impossible." Feng Wu smiled at him. He stared at Feng Wu. "You're a level 7 spiritual lord. Aren't you a level 7 spiritual elder? Since when did you become a spiritual lord?" No one else could do that. It had taken her such a short while. The spiritual king last saw her minutes ago, and she had risen from a level 7 spiritual elder to a level 7 spiritual lord. How was that even possible? Feng Wu shrugged. "I'm a genius like that. What can I do?" The spiritual king took a deep breath. "So, you do have the seed of the spirit source." Feng Wu crossed her hands behind her back and smiled at him. She had been stalling. Didn't the birds say that Jun Linyuan was coming soon? Where was he? She had become a level 7 spiritual lord, but she still wasn't powerful enough to fight the spiritual king. He could easily kill her. She was right. The spiritual king finally saw what was going on. He smirked at Feng Wu. "So what if you're a level 7 spiritual lord? You're still going to die." On the other side of the crystal ball. "This man is a spiritual king." Emperor Wu narrowed his eyes. There aren't many such men in the empire. In other words, he should be someone they all knew. Master Dugu fell silent. He lowered his gaze to avoid meeting Emperor Wu's eyes. He even looked frustrated. It was obvious that he knew who the spiritual king was. "He's trying to kill Xiao Wu." Lady Northern Feng stared at the man. "Who on earth is he?" If he really killed her, Northern Feng Mansion would take revenge for Feng Wu. "He looks familiar." Emperor Wu rubbed his chin and was lost in thought. An idea came and went in a flash. Master Dugu grew anxious. He wanted to warn Zhou Ming so that he could leave before it was too late. It was all right to assassinate Feng Wu, but he couldn't kill a genius girl that the crown prince was fond of in front of everyone. The Zhou family would be in a lot of trouble. But how was Master Dugu going to inform his ally? Master Dugu and Empress Dugu looked at each other. Empress Dugu gave him a hint by glancing at Ranmil. Master Dugu nodded. Thump. Chapter 22:18. Feng Wu had to die. Master Dugu then sent a streak of energy toward Ranmil. Ranmil was already tired from controlling the crystal ball. "What?" Ranmil cried out in surprise. With that, the crystal ball began to crack. The cracks soon covered the entire ball. There was a scream, and Ranmil spat out a mouthful of blood. "Ranmil?" Emperor Wu nervously called her name. But the others only cared about the crystal ball. "Why is it broken? I want to see more. What should we do now?" Lady Northern Feng was the most anxious of them all. Because she genuinely cared about her goddaughter. She stared at Ranmil and wanted Ranmil to repair the crystal ball. But Master Dugu spoke first. "Is Lady Ranmil affected by the backlash?" Ranmil put a hand on her chest and nodded. "Yes, I was injured when the ball shattered." She covered her mouth and coughed. There was blood on her palm. Emperor Wu immediately said, "Don't worry about it. Your health is more important than anything else." Empress Dugu's pupils contracted, and there was jealousy and hatred in her eyes. Lady Northern Feng wanted to say something but kept her silence in the end. Her Xiao Wu was facing a spiritual king alone. What should she do? Lady Northern Feng was so worried. At the same time, Feng Wu was staring at the spiritual king. The spiritual king was staring back at her. "Feng Wu, do you regret it?" The spiritual king stared at Feng Wu with his emotionless eyes. Feng Wu glanced at him. "What should I regret?" The man put his hands behind his back and sighed in a condescending way. "If you hadn't returned to the imperial capital, you wouldn't be wealthy, but you wouldn't be dead either. Do you regret it?" Feng Wu narrowed her eyes. "So, Master Zhou, were you going to let me live if I had stayed at the northern border?" The man nodded. I would have kept you alive if you weren't so talented. Feng Wu asked why. The spiritual king said, your miserable life would only make Qinghuan look more brilliant. That was why we didn't kill you when we destroyed your cultivation ability. It was Master Zhou who had done that to her. Zhou Ming couldn't be bothered to hide his identity. Unfortunately, the crystal ball was broken, and no one on the other side heard it. If they did, the Zhou family's reputation would be ruined. Master Zhou and Feng Wu didn't know that their conversation earlier had been broadcasted, nor did they know that the live stream had been cut off. Master Zhou thought that Feng Wu was bound to die, so he didn't choose his words carefully. I was going to spare your life, but... He shook his head. My children died because of you. It wouldn't be right if I let you live. So, he waved at Feng Wu. Come over here. Feng Wu stepped back involuntarily. She was no fool. Of course, she wouldn't go to him. She turned and ran away. However, she only took a few steps before there was a thump. She ran into an invisible shield, which left a bloody gash on her forehead. Involuntarily, she turned. Chapter 22:19, Untitled. There was a thump, and a transparent shield fell from above. The speed and the weight. If Feng Wu hadn't dodged in time, she would have been severed in half. Don't bother. The spiritual king sighed. The walls are all around you, and they'll keep closing in. He was right that as soon as he said that, the walls began to move in toward her. Feng Wu narrowed her eyes. The walls forced her to fall back. When they stopped moving, she was also confined in a small area that was only 1 square meter in size. She could see her reflection on the walls around her. The spiritual king shook his head and said, I have to admit that you're more talented than Qinghuan. Because of that, Feng Wu had to die. Die. The look in his eyes was very serious. He reached for Feng Wu's thin neck. Jun Linyuan, if you don't get here now, I'm really going to die. Feng Wu shouted into the sky. Jun Linyuan. The spiritual king smirked. He's busy fighting the remaining spies of the Dongsang kingdom. He'll never be. However, he heard a noise before he could finish his sentence. Rumbled at the air stirred. Thump. There was an explosion. One of the transparent walls that had cornered Feng Wu was ripped open by an invisible hand. Crack. Feng Wu looked over her shoulder. The extremely handsome teenager walked toward her with a sword on his back. There was something utterly terrifying about him. The power he gave off made one want to tremble and kneel on the ground. Every step he took seemed to shake the ground. It was as if tidal waves were surging behind him. He was too powerful to be described with mere words. Jun Linyuan. Feng Wu didn't realize how happy she was when she saw him. She was finally relieved. Master Zhou, the spiritual king, had been very condescending when spoke to Feng Wu, but he paled when Jun Linyuan showed up. If you tell him who I am, I'll kill your mother. He quickly whispered those words in Feng Wu's ear. Whoosh! He disappeared from sight. He could have killed Feng Wu at the last minute, but he didn't dare take the risk. Jun Linyuan would surely kill him if he killed Feng Wu. Therefore, he ran away as fast as he could. Feng Wu frowned when she saw the spiritual king disappear. Aren't you going after him? She asked Jun Linyuan. Just then, Jun Linyuan swayed and fell into her arms. Jun Linyuan? Jun Linyuan. Feng Wu anxiously called his name in a low voice. Little Phoenix landed on her shoulder at that moment and said, His Royal Highness is badly wounded. He was stabbed and shot with many arrows. If you don't treat him now, he'll die. Chapter 22:20, Are You Even Human? Feng Wu removed her hand from Jun Linyuan's back and saw that it was covered with blood. Why did this happen? She murmured. Little Phoenix said grumpily, He killed a lot of people so that they wouldn't come after you. It was a slaughterhouse on the other side of the mountain. They were all ninjas of the Dongsang kingdom. Some of them were very powerful, especially the group leaders. It took Jun Linyuan quite some effort to take them out. Feng Wu checked the trial log. There were 77 people on the revival list, and after Jun Linyuan's battle, there were only 33 left. Of the 7 group leaders, 3 were dead. There were still 4 left. Wait. Feng Wu noticed something unexpected. She checked the surviving members. Of the Saturn and Sun teams, only 1 member was still alive. She believed that it was the woman in the Imperial capital. This operation had been carried out by the Moon and Mars teams. The log should show 100% completed if Jun Linyuan had killed all of them. But 10% of the Mars team was still left. That was to say, one of them was still alive. Who was the person? Did they run away? Or were they hiding somewhere? Jun Linyuan was barely breathing, and Feng Wu was busy saving him while worrying about the remaining assassin. And she was right to be concerned. As expected. When she began to sew up a wound on Jun Linyuan's belly, a person appeared behind Feng Wu. Watch out! Little Phoenix shouted. Feng Wu had kept her guard up. When she heard the bird, she grabbed Jun Linyuan and rolled to the side, dodging the attack. Ha! She heard someone laughing coldly behind her. She looked over her shoulder and saw a person standing on the spot where she had been. The person was clad in light green and seemed to be ready to fade into the background at any moment. Are you the leader of the Mars team? Feng Wu asked. The person visibly tensed up. He had no idea that the seemingly ignorant girl could uncover his identity. In that case, he couldn't let her live. Because of that, he was distracted for a brief moment. Whoosh! Jun Linyuan moved. No one had expected that with all the blood loss, he could still move. He moved as fast as lightning, and there was a pale golden glow on his right hand. It was with that hand that he grabbed the team leader's neck. The man stared at Jun Linyuan in disbelief. No. He had been hiding in the area since the battle started. Once Jun Linyuan was weakened, he would kill him with a single strike. He had still been cautious when Jun Linyuan was injured. But he no longer suspected anything when Feng Wu started sewing up Jun Linyuan's wounds. Even then, he still fell into Jun Linyuan's trap. Why did he still have any strength left? Was he even human? Chapter 22-21. What on earth was she? Jun Linyuan smirked. Crack. With that sound, the Mars team leader fell to the ground. Feng Wu asked, "Is he dead?" Jun Linyuan glanced at Feng Wu, but before he could say anything, he swayed and fainted. Feng Wu was shocked. She immediately checked his pulse. Such severe injuries. She bit her lower lip. Jun Linyuan had already been badly wounded when he arrived, and it had taken her some painstaking effort to revive him. However, he had torn open his wounds when he snapped the ninja's neck. Blood gushed out again. Feng Wu wanted to hit Jun Linyuan. Can't you stay still? Why won't you trust me? Little Phoenix said timidly, that man was a spiritual king. Could you beat him? Feng Wu didn't know what to say. She hadn't been able to do anything to Zhuoming. If the team leader was also a spiritual king, she wouldn't have been able to do anything either. However, with his injuries, how could he still kill a spiritual king? Feng Wu was astonished. Little Phoenix looked at her and said, now you know how huge the gap is between the two of you. Feng Wu didn't know what to say. She then focused on treating Jun Linyuan. Luckily, Feng Wu had some pills on her that could treat internal injuries. And with a flip of her fingers, green light flew out of her fingertips and into Jun Linyuan's wounds. Other people would be astonished if they saw this. Because Feng Wu's medical skills were unbelievable. In fact, someone did see it. It was none other than the team leader. Jun Linyuan didn't have enough strength left when he grabbed his neck, so the team leader only fainted. Feng Wu felt that she was being watched. She suddenly turned around. And their eyes met. The team leader hesitated for a split second. That was all Feng Wu needed. Before he realized it, Feng Wu pounced on him. Fallen Star Swordplay. Ground Rule. Fire Ground. Intertwining Wood. Ice Sword. Sweeping Wind. Little Phoenix. Feng Tutu. She used everything she had. One stance after another. Having lost the decisive moment, The team leader could only try to defend himself. But Feng Wu knew that the man was a spiritual king, and even though he had been injured by Jun Linyuan, he was still much more powerful than she was. The man knew it as well, so he smirked. What should he do? I'm going to make a breakthrough now. Feng Wu broke another advancement egg. What was she doing? The team leader found her reaction idiotic. However, the spiritual essence around her really began to stir violently. It then rushed toward her. The team leader's eyes widened. What? She could make a breakthrough just like that? What on earth was she? Chapter 2222, Untitled. I'm going to make a breakthrough now. Feng Wu bellowed. With that, she made a breakthrough. The Mars team leader stared at her in disbelief. That wasn't possible. It just wasn't. However, Feng Wu stared at him and smirked. Another. What? What the heck? The man's eyes popped. How could anyone achieve that? Who did she think she was? Why could she make breakthroughs as freely as she wanted? That was... Meanwhile, he couldn't try to kill her while she was making her breakthrough. She was so close to becoming a spiritual king. If that really happened, the severely injured team leader wouldn't be her match. Jun Linyuan's sudden attack had robbed him of almost 70% of his ability. Feng Wu smiled. I'm going to become a spiritual king now. What? That was impossible. No way. The man turned to run. He didn't want to stay here anymore. She was so scary. But he didn't know that Feng Wu was only bluffing this time. As soon as he turned his back to Feng Wu, she drew out her fallen star sword. The third stance. Fatal thunder. Feng Wu spared no effort. Formidable energy from the sword poured into the man from behind. Poof! The blade pierced his body and exited his chest. He looked down at the blade in disbelief. Blood dripped from the tip of the blade. He looked over his shoulder in astonishment. You didn't. His voice was hoarse. If that was the case, why did he run? He could have fought her. He was defeated only because he had tried to run. Rumbled. Feng Wu didn't stop there. She twisted the sword, which was still in the man's chest. The man screamed. He pulled away from the blade and tried to escape. He still had a few tricks up his sleeves. After all, he was one of the 7 team leaders. Moreover, he was also an expert ninja. If he ran into the woods, it would be impossible to find him again. Feng Wu narrowed her eyes and shouted. Ground control. Daze. Ground control. Slow down. Ground control. Freeze. She used 3 formidable stances in a row. They drained her of spiritual essence, and her face was very pale, but she successfully rendered the team leader immobile on the spot. Poof! Before the man could move again, she struck down with her fallen star sword. This time, it landed on his head. The impact sliced his head open, and blood gushed out. The last thing the man saw was Feng Wu's face. He never thought that he would be killed by a mere spiritual lord one day. Chapter 2223, Untitled. Unfortunately, the crystal ball was already broken. If the others had seen what just happened, they would think even more highly of Feng Wu. Feng Wu shook her head, took out the jade plate her beautiful master had given to her, and put it on. The plate immediately hid her cultivation level so that no one could tell how capable she was. You have the concealing jade. Why, the man couldn't believe his eyes. Feng Wu crouched down and moved closer. Why I have it doesn't concern you. Right now, you need to hand me the revival list. Why do you know that? The man couldn't believe his ears. Feng Wu chuckled. That's not important. Just hand it over. The man smirked and wanted to bite down on his tongue. He wasn't going to survive all his wounds, so committing suicide was his best choice. But Feng Wu gripped his chin before he could do that. A pill was thrown into his mouth and it slid down his throat. Feng Wu also made sure that it was quickly absorbed so that he couldn't spit it out. What did you give me? He bellowed at Feng Wu. Who knew that a spiritual king could end up in such a miserable state? Feng Wu didn't speak, but the man soon realized what he had eaten. Because a sensation was rising inside him. At first, it was only a slight tingle in his hands, but soon, it spread all over his body and grew more and more severe. He felt as if he was being stung by 1,000 insects. Ah! He rolled around on the ground with tears running down his face and drool from his mouth. "Kill me," he pleaded. That was how powerful the pill was. Even this man couldn't bear it. Feng Sun and Xian Yi arrived. They didn't speak and only stood quietly behind Feng Wu as they looked down at the man. "The revival list," Feng Wu repeated. "I don't know anything about it." Feng Wu crossed her arms and said casually, "This is a supreme-level stinging pills." The man stiffened. Feng Wu nodded. "I see that you know what it is. I think you also know that without an antidote, this sensation won't go away on its own." You don't know what you're talking about," the man writhed on the ground. Feng Sun was about to step forward, when Feng Wu stopped him. She knew that the man would eventually give in. She was right. The man grew desperate until he couldn't take it anymore. He said, "I'll tell you on one condition. I'll let you die after you give me the list," Feng Wu said solemnly. "All right." The man looked into Feng Wu's eyes and said, "Hua Jinxiu has the lists." "Hua Jinxiu?" Feng Wu hadn't heard of that name before, but Feng Sun cried out, "How can it be her?" Thump. While Feng Wu was distracted, the man smashed his head on a big rock next to him. Chapter 22-24, Untitled. The rock shattered, and the man grabbed a handful of the broken pieces. "Ooh." Feng Sun wanted to stop him, but it was too late. "He's dead." He shook his head with a bitter smile on his face. Feng Wu nodded. He was determined to die. He only pretended to smash his head on the rock, when he was actually planning to choke himself. She had a solemn look on her face. Even death couldn't deter the Mars team leader. That was how tough he was. The Dongsang Kingdom will be a very difficult enemy if they're all like this. Feng Wu shook her head. Feng Sun frowned. "Is it true, the thing he said about Hua Jinxiu?" Feng Wu asked, "Who's Hua Jinxiu?" Feng Sun said, "Hua Jinxiu is a member of the Hua clan. They live a reclusive life in Flower Valley and seldom come out into the world. Unflower was the most famous member of the clan. She killed people in broad daylight on the street in the imperial capital in front of His Majesty. Well, he was still the crown prince back then. Ever since then, the clan grew even quieter." Feng Sun frowned. "But this ninja has just gotten that clan involved. Hua Jinxiu is the current leader of the clan. It's said that she's as talented as Unflower, if not better. Why would she get involved with the Dongsang Kingdom? I don't believe it." Feng Sun shook his head. Feng Wu didn't reply. Instead, she turned to Xian Yi and asked, "What information did you get from the imperial capital?" Xian Yi shook his head. "We were too late. Mo Haolin's wife has disappeared, and their house was torched. It was a dead end." Feng Sun asked anxiously, "What should we do now?" Feng Wu checked her log. Their plan had lured out over half of the people on the revival list. 44 were dead, and there were 33 left. That was to say, there were 3 teams left. They were the Mercury, Jupiter, and Venus teams. "We don't even know how many people there are on that list, nor do we know where they are or how many of them have been killed," Feng Sun said in resignation. "We caught a few of them and interrogated them, but they all managed to kill themselves before we could get anything out of them." He was full of despair. Feng Wu was still studying the dead team leader. She moved closer, crouched down and searched his body. Feng Sun smiled wryly. "I checked already. People like him won't carry things on them in case they're caught." Just then, Feng Wu picked up a jade pendant and showed it to Feng Sun. Feng Sun said, "That's just a common pendant. You can buy it anywhere for next to nothing. The quality is so poor I can't even bring myself to touch it." But at that moment, Feng Wu crushed the pendant. It's a storage pendant that has been modified. The space inside is only as big as a drawer, Feng Wu told Feng Sun after she examined it carefully. A storage pendant? How's that possible? If that's the case, why, I see. An idea suddenly struck Feng Sun, and he smacked his forehead. I get it now. Chapter 22-25, Untitled. I see. Feng Sun smacked his own forehead. He used this inferior jade precisely because it's the most important thing. He even put it in the most obvious spot. He must have thought that we would miss it. Well, I almost did. But how did you notice it? Feng Sun asked Feng Wu in bewilderment. How did Feng Wu notice it? She didn't at first, but after becoming a level 9 spiritual lord, something changed in her, and she seemed to be able to detect the energy of a magic soul vine. Feng Wu opened her palm, revealing a small plant. Hey, what's that? Feng Sun asked curiously. When he saw the sapling, he said, What's this grass with 4 leaves? Feng Wu couldn't tell either. She only vaguely knew that it had grown out of her body and had the energy of the magic soul vine. Could it be a baby magic soul vine? She recalled that someone had put the vine's poison in the seed of spirit source when she tried to absorb it. She was poisoned, and Jun Linyuan had to swap bodies with her to refine the vine and the seed for her. Now that Feng Wu had used up the seed, was this sapling the outcome of Jun Linyuan's refinement? Xiao Wu? Xiao Wu? Feng Sun called her name when he saw that she was lost in thought. Feng Wu woke up from her reverie and heard approaching footsteps. Hence, she didn't reply. Reinforcements had finally arrived. At the foot of the mountain. It had been a fierce battle, and Jun Linyuan could barely walk on his own. Feng Wu helped him down the mountain. When they reached the foot of the mountain, they were welcomed by high-ranking officials. Master Dugu, Lord Mu, Feng Yanfeng, and many others were present. Feng Wu looked in Master Dugu's direction and saw a familiar figure. It was Master Zhua. Their gazes met, and both narrowed their eyes. Zhua Ming gave her a warning look. He regretted his decision. If he had known that Feng Wu would come back alive, he would never have revealed his identity. Therefore, he had to warn Feng Wu not to expose him. Otherwise, he would kill her mother. How dare he threaten her with her mother? Feng Wu hated it when other people tried to threaten her. She was filled with rage. She wanted to kill Zhua Ming right here and now to eliminate the threat, but in the end, she only took a deep breath. She would kill Zhua Ming, but not now. Although she was a level 9 spiritual lord already, it still wasn't enough to kill Zhua Ming. She could wait. She was still improving, whereas Zhua Ming would remain at that level. Soon, she would be able to kill him herself. She gave him one last look before she turned away. Zhua Ming smirked inwardly. He decided it was because she didn't dare offend the powerful Zhua family, even with Jun Linyuan as her patron. Your Royal Highness, Miss Feng, as the official in charge of daily affairs on this trip, Lord Mu was kept busy. He hurried over and wanted to give Jun Linyuan a hand. Chapter 22-26, Untitled. But the Crown Prince only gave Lord Mu a cold look. Feng intervened in time. His Royal Highness is very particular with personal hygiene and doesn't like human contact. Lord Mu, I hope you're not offended. Personal hygiene? No human contact. But what about Feng Wu? She was holding his arm. Feng Sang snorted. What about Feng Wu? Why can she do it? Feng answered in a solemn tone. His Royal Highness considers Miss Feng as one of our own. The crowd was speechless. That successfully rendered Feng Sang speechless. Seeing Qiuling and Chaoga in the distance, she snorted. I don't see why she's so proud. She might consider herself a genius, but she's even weaker than her friend and her maid. Feng Sang didn't try to keep her voice down because she wanted everyone to hear her. That's right. A level 7 spiritual elder isn't bad, but she still isn't as good as Qiuling. Other children of the officials all chuckled and sneered at Feng Wu. At level 7 of the spiritual elder stage, Feng Wu was even below her maid. That was just humiliating. Hearing that, Qiuling frowned and looked displeased. However, the officials who had watched the battle through the crystal ball felt conflicted when they heard that, and so did Zhua Ming, who had fought Feng Wu. Seeing Feng Wu and Jun Linyuan head for the tent, Lord Mu patted Feng Yanfeng on the shoulder and said, "Good lucks." Feng Yanfeng didn't know how to describe his feelings at the moment. Emperor Wu had summoned him to look into the crystal ball as well. Although it had been near the end, Feng Yanfeng still managed to notice something. Feng Wu wasn't a level 7 spiritual elder at all. She was a level 7 spiritual lord. That made her capable enough to be the head of the Feng clan. That thought made Feng Yanfeng want to cry. He walked up to Feng Sang and gave her a stern look. "Shut up." Feng Yiran wanted to speak up for Feng Sang, but his father scolded him as well. Zhuo Ming went back to his own tent. "Master, Mrs." Zhuo quickly walked up to him and asked eagerly, "Did it work? Did you get revenge for Qingyu?" She knew about Zhuo Ming's assassination attempt on Feng Wu, and Mrs. Dugu had told her about the crystal ball. That was why she had hurried back to the tent. The ball had been shattered before Zhuo Ming confronted Feng Wu, which was why Mrs. Zhuo was so excited. She didn't believe that Feng Wu could escape as spiritual king. Zhuo Ming brushed off her hands with a dark face. Mrs. Zhuo suddenly had a bad feeling. She moved closer and asked, "Master? Did the mission fail? Didn't you kill her?" Zhuo Ming said, "Shut up." Panic-stricken Mrs. Zhuo grabbed his hand and said, "That's impossible. My sister-in-law said that you faced Feng Wu alone by the lake and could kill her with a flip of your hand. Why didn't you?" "By the lake? Face Feng Wu?" Master's was stomach lurched. He turned around and stared at his wife. "How do you know that? Why do they know that I confronted Feng Wu by the lake?" Chapter 22-27, Untitled. Mrs. Zhuo said, "My sister-in-law said so." Her sister-in-law was none other than Mrs. Dugu. Master Dugu told her. Zhuo Ming shook Mrs. Zhuo so hard that she thought she would throw up. How did Master Dugu know? Zhuo Ming began to panic. Master Dugu said that Consort Ran Mill had a crystal ball. When she injected her spiritual essence into it, it showed her the person she wanted to see. That was how they saw Feng Wu in the ball. "What do you mean by saw Feng Wu?" Master Zhuo felt his mouth go very dry. "I think it means that the crystal ball located Feng Wu and showed everything that was happening around her, like a live stream," said Mrs. So, what? Zhuo Ming felt like he had been struck by a bolt of lightning. Had he been exposed? What? No matter how calm he had been, he was frightened out of his wits now. "So, they all know that I was going to assassinate Feng Wu?" Right now, it didn't sound like an assassination anymore. Everyone might now know it was him. "No, it's not like that." Mrs. Zhuo tried to calm him down. "Master Dugu did something when you appeared in the crystal ball, causing Consort Ran Mill to lose control over it. It shattered, and no one saw what happened next. That's why I'm here to ask you if you killed Feng Wu." "So, my identity wasn't exposed?" Master Zhuo was relieved. He owed Master Dugu a big favor now. Mrs. Zhuo shook her head. "No, it wasn't. Master Dugu reacted just in time, so none of them recognized you." Feud at Master Zhuo let out a breath of relief. He realized that sweat had soaked the clothes on his back. "What happened after that? Did you really let her get away? You could have killed her so easily." Mrs. Zhuo stomped her foot. "It was such a great opportunity." Master Zhuo said, Jun Linyuan arrived. Mrs. Zhuo had to admit that her husband didn't have any other choice. "So be it then. We'll have plenty of opportunities to kill her in the future," said Mrs. "By the way, where are your men? Have they gone back home?" Jingyang province was the Zhuo family's territory, which was why they could send out so many spiritual lords. Mrs. Zhuo complained, "Not only didn't you kill Feng Wu, but all of them also failed to take down a level 7 spiritual elder. How useless." Master Zhuo's face twitched. "Where are they?" Mrs. Zhuo asked curiously. Just then, a man dressed in gray showed up. "My lord, we've collected the bodies, all 8 of them." Master Zhuo paled. He had thought that some of them might have survived the battle, but as it turned out, they had all been killed. The man with the iron hook was Mrs. Zhuo's personal guard. Cremate them and give the ashes back to their families for burial? Master Zhuo gritted his teeth, his face twitching with hatred. Because he couldn't leave any traces behind, he had made the arrangements beforehand. His plan had been to collect Feng Wu's body, but he ended up collecting those of his own men. Yes. The man in gray promptly left after that. Chapter 22-28, Untitled. Collect the bodies? Whose bodies? Where's my guard? Where's Hook? Mrs. Zhuo suddenly had a very bad feeling. All adult members of the Zhuo family had their own guards, and Mrs. Zhuo was no exception. Zhuo Ming knew that he had to tell Mrs. Zhuo, but he couldn't bring himself to say it. Mrs. Zhuo panicked and said, "I'll go get him." Wait, Master Zhuo stopped her. "Hook is dead." What? Mrs. Zhuo couldn't believe her ears. Did His Royal Highness kill him? Zhuo Ming shook his head. It was Feng Wu. That can't be true. Mrs. Zhuo grabbed the front of her husband's robe and shouted, "You're lying. Feng Wu is only a level 7 spiritual elder." Zhuo Ming remained silent and gave her a pitying look. Mrs. Zhuo's stomach lurched a little. Her brother, Master Dugu, had also looked at her that way. Mrs. Zhuo was originally from a minor branch of the Tao family from Ruyang and had been brought to the Dugu family when her mother remarried. Therefore, she wasn't very close with Master Dugu. Most of the time, she would address him as Master Dugu instead of brother. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Mrs. Zhuo's voice trembled. Master Zhuo said, "Feng Wu was the one who killed him." Mrs. Zhuo said, "Feng Wu is only a level 7 spiritual elder. She's not even good enough to be Qinghuan's maid. Didn't you hear them laugh at her? She's even weaker than her own maid." A level 7 spiritual elder? Master Zhuo smiled sadly. "I wish she was only a level 7 spiritual elder." Mrs. Zhuo asked, "Is she not?" Master Zhuo said, "Of course not. She's a level 7 spiritual lord at least." Thump, thump, thumped that Mrs. Zhuo stumbled back and stared at Master Zhuo in disbelief. "I don't believe you." Master Zhuo said, "Didn't your brother tell you that Feng Wu has the seed of spirit source, and she was making one breakthrough after another? She was a level 7 spiritual elder when she went up the mountain, but she returned as a level 7 spiritual lord." No, but they're saying. That's because Feng Wu carries something that can conceal her energy so that no one can tell what her real level is. Master Feng gritted his teeth. "Tell our children to stay away from her for the time being." "What children?" Mrs. Zhuo sobbed. "We only have 5. Qinglu met his untimely death first, then Qingxian and Qingyu were killed. Qingyi is still cultivating in seclusion, and Qinghuan is still out there. I don't have any children to warn anymore." Master Zhuo was filled with sadness and rage. "Don't worry, my lady. Feng Wu won't live for much longer." Mrs. Zhuo threw herself into Master Zhuo's arms and burst into tears. Feng Wu helped Jun Linyuan back to his tent. Emperor Wu had sent Lord Mu and the others to pick them up because he wanted to ask them about what happened on the mountain. However, Jun Linyuan was severely injured, so they went straight back to their tent. Master Dugu and Lord Mu went to report to Emperor Wu. Jun Linyuan lost his balance as soon as he was in the tent. He almost fainted. The impact almost dragged Feng Wu to the ground. It took her a lot of effort to lay him on the bed. She had treated his wounds when they were on the mountain. Chapter 22-29, Untitled. After helping Jun Linyuan lie down, Feng Wu wanted to stand up, but Jun Linyuan wouldn't let go of her skirt. His grip was so tight that she couldn't pry his hand open. "Miss Feng." Feng felt sorry for her and tried to save her from the struggle. "Please sit down. What do you need? I'll get it for you." "That's right, Xiao Wu. Just stay where you are," said Feng Sun. Just then they heard footsteps outside. It was Gao, the eunuch. He was there to bring Feng Wu to Emperor Wu. Feng Wu didn't want to go because she knew that Emperor Wu wanted to know what had happened on the mountain and about the revival list. She could see from the log that some of the members were dead, but Emperor Wu couldn't, which was where the problem lay. Moreover, she didn't have any leads at the moment. Now wasn't the best time to see Emperor Wu. Hence, Feng Wu pointed at Jun Linyuan and told Gao, "His Royal Highness is still in danger. If I don't keep an eye on him, he might not make it." Gao didn't dare take such a risk and scurried off. Feng Sun gave her the thumbs up. That was amazing, lying to Gao. Many influential men can't wait to suck up to him, you know. Feng Wu said grumpily, "If I don't lie to him, I'll have to go to the Emperor now. What am I supposed to tell him? I don't have the revival list or any leads." "By the way, didn't you say that there's something off about this jade pendant?" asked Feng Sun. Feng Wu nodded. "Yes, it's a storage jade." Feng Sun asked, "What?" Feng Wu said, "But it's only a small one, no bigger than the size of a bucket." Feng Sun said, "A storage jade? Even if the space is only the size of a bucket, it's worth a fortune." Feng Wu asked, "Is it that valuable?" Feng Sun said, "Of course. All storage jade pendants are. Many people need them to keep secret documents or materials. It's not something one can buy with money." He looked keenly at the jade pendant in Feng Wu's hand. Feng Wu asked, "Do you want it?" Feng Sun took it without hesitation. "Sure." Feng Wu didn't know what to say. "But how do I open it?" Feng Sun fumbled with it for quite a while but still couldn't open it. Feng Wu said, "Most of the time, it'll recognize its master by tasting their blood." Blood? Before Feng Wu could say anything else, Feng Sun bit his finger and dripped his blood on the jade. They waited for the miraculous moment, but nothing happened. The drop of blood rolled around on the jade before falling to the ground. The jade didn't change and the storage space didn't open either. Feng Sun was bewildered. Is it possible that it's just an ordinary jade pendant? Did you make a mistake? Feng Wu stared at him. I can detect the size of the storage space. How can I be wrong? Feng Sun said in frustration. How should I open it, then? Feng Wu took the pendant and examined it, but she couldn't find anything. She then closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and blocked out all unnecessary thoughts. Chapter 2230, Untitled. When Feng Wu tried to feel out the jade, she felt the vine on her palm sway a little. OMG! That gave her a strange feeling. What she sensed wasn't what the people of the Junwo Empire knew as spiritual essence. Rather, it was the ninja energy of the Dongsang Kingdom. The sapling was also the reason she had noticed the abnormality with the jade. An idea suddenly occurred to her. If the vine could detect ninja energy, did it mean that she could easily recognize a ninja of the Dongsang Kingdom with the help of the vine? At that thought, her eyes snapped open. Xiao Wu, what's going on? Feng Sun saw that Feng Wu's eyes were frighteningly bright. Feng Wu hadn't tested the theory yet, so she couldn't rush to any conclusion. She shook her head and went back to sensing the vine. Open, she commanded. Feng Sun was speechless. Even his blood couldn't do anything to the jade, so he didn't think that Feng Wu's command would work. But to his amazement, the storage space opened with a click. Just like that? Feng Sun stared at Feng Wu in disbelief. Feng Wu put her hand inside. It's less than a cubic meter in size. Feng Wu shook her head. It's the size of a bucket at most. Feng Sun said, even so, it's still very valuable. Feng Wu didn't reply. She only started taking things out of the pendant. Not many things could fit inside the jade. The first thing she took out was clothing typical to the Dongsang Kingdom. Jun Linyuan had given Feng Wu a book on the Dongsang Kingdom before, and Feng Wu had obtained a lot of information from that book. She recognized it at first glance. A green battle suit. The Dongsang Kingdom was all about order, and their battle suits strictly reflected that. Spiritual masters didn't have battle suits. Only spiritual grandmasters and above were eligible, and their levels were reflected by the suits they wore. Spiritual grandmasters wore red. Spiritual elders wore orange. Spiritual lords wore yellow. Spiritual kings wore green. She was holding a green suit. Feng Sun couldn't stop staring at it. Feng Wu asked, "What?" Feng Sun said, "Look at the inscriptions." As a formation master, Feng Wu was well versed in inscriptions, so she spotted them immediately. Feng Wu asked, "What about them?" Feng Sun said, "They can enhance the effectiveness of the wearer's attacks. My dad's armor has similar inscriptions on it. Do you know why the tiny Dongsang kingdom was able to successfully invade us 13 years ago and almost overrun us?" Feng Wu asked why. Feng Sun said, "Because of these inscriptions." "Are you sure?" Feng Sun said excitedly, "Of course. The Dongsang kingdom has many formation masters and even more inscription masters." Inscriptions were the basic elements of formations. It was safe to say that not all inscription masters were formation masters, but all formation masters had to be inscription masters. Do you know? Nearly all the Dongsang kingdom soldiers had inscriptions on their battle suits. That was why our soldiers on the same level weren't their match. Chapter 2231, Untitled. And it wasn't just the soldiers. Even our spiritual lords and spiritual kings were defeated by the Dongsang kingdom soldiers who were on the same level. Feng Wu frowned. Was it because of the inscriptions? Feng Sun nodded. Yes. Feng Wu was perplexed. If that's the case, our empire should focus on training more inscription masters. Feng Sun smiled wryly. That's easier said than done. Inscriptions are very complicated, and only the smartest and the most focused people have a chance to become inscription masters. The people of Dongsang come by those attributes naturally, which is why they have so many inscription masters. We may have many smart people, but not enough of them have enough focus. Good formation masters are hard to come by, let alone inscription masters. The Dongsang kingdom has many spiritual masters and even more inscription masters. Their battle suits are lined with inscriptions and even formations. How are we supposed to fight them? Feng Wu didn't know what to say. Feng Sun said, "Their ninja skills are a special formation skill." Feng Wu thought about it and found that to be the case. If we have so few formation masters, can't we import some from the Dongsang kingdom? Feng Wu asked. Curse them or bribe them. I'm sure some would turn to our side. But Feng Sun shook his head with a wry smile. Do you think we haven't tried? It doesn't work. We could persuade any other member of the Dongsang kingdom, but the formation masters are part of their strategic resources, and if an inscription master dares to come over to our side, their entire clan will be killed. That would deter just about anyone. Feng Wu said, "You have a point." Feng Sun said, "The problem is that our empire has so few inscription masters and even fewer formation masters. You're a spiritual lord, and you've seldom worked with inscriptions, let alone add them to soldiers' armor. Am I right?" Feng Wu nodded. That explained it. Feng Wu had been wondering why people of the Junhua Empire hardly ever mentioned inscriptions or formations. There were simply too few of them for the common folk to know about. The inscriptions aren't very advanced. Feng Wu studied the battle suit. Level 7 at most. She saw the others all give her strange looks. Feng Wu was confused. What? Level 7 is not very advanced? Feng Sun stared at her and gritted his teeth. At most. Feng Wu tilted her head. Is level 7 very advanced? Feng Sun was astonished. He didn't know that Feng Wu had been learning from her beautiful master since she was very little. And her beautiful master had taught her as much as she could remember. She had already learned level 7 inscriptions when she was 6. Her beautiful master had then said that was already enough, and she could learn more advanced levels when she was a little older. Feng Wu told Feng Sun the truth. I already learned level 7 when I was 6. How advanced can it be? Ahem. The crown prince finally woke up at that moment, and when he heard that, he almost spat out the water in his mouth. Feng Wu was bewildered. What's the matter? Chapter 2233, Level 7 Inscription Masters. What? Feng Sun was baffled. Xiao Wu, what did you just say? Feng Wu said matter-of-factly, you can have the pendant. Feng Sun said, Xiao Wu, do you even know what this is? It's a storage pendant. He was still babbling on when Feng Wu cut him off. Do you want it or not? If not, just, of course I want it. Feng Sun immediately tucked the pendant away, fearing that someone else would take it. Feng Wu didn't know what to say. Xiao Wu, don't you want it for yourself? Feng Sun asked. If you do, I can give it to you. Despite what he said, Feng Sun kept his hands pressed to the pocket where the jade was. He didn't look like he wanted to give it away at all. Feng Wu rolled her eyes at him. I have my own. Not only did she have a storage space of her own, she also had the one from Jun Linyuan as cover. Therefore, she meant it when she said that she didn't need the pendant. I knew that you wouldn't try to take it away from me. Feng Sun also knew about the storage pendant Jun Linyuan had given her. Feng Wu handed the battle suit to Xian. Do you want it? Xian Yi's eyes lit up. The battle suit had inscriptions on it. With such a suit, he would have a great advantage in fighting cultivators on the same level. Xian Yi liked the idea. After that, the thick book was the only thing left. It won't open. Everyone had tried, but no one could make it budge. In the end, Feng Sun had to turn to Feng Wu for help. Xiao Wu, how did you open the storage space? Can you do the same for this book? Feng Wu shook her head. She had tried, but it didn't work. The inscriptions, Jun Linyuan glanced at her and said casually. The inscriptions? Where are they? I don't see any. Feng Sun turned the book over and over in his hands. Feng Wu's eyes lit up. Wait, she gestured to Feng Sun to put the book down. She then searched every inch of its cover until she felt the marks along the edge. That's it. The inscriptions. She cried out in pleasant surprise. They're really there. I almost missed them. Feng Sun looked at the marks that resembled a barcode and asked, Are these really inscriptions? Feng Wu said, Why not? At level 7, inscriptions can be in many forms. One can conceal them in almost anything. You can walk into a trap if you're not careful enough. Why are you so happy about level 7 inscriptions? Feng Sun found her reaction idiotic. You little fool. How are we going to open the book now? Things would be much easier in the Imperial capital. We have a few inscription masters at the Imperial College. Who can we go to now? I see. Feng Sun smacked his forehead. How could I forget him? Master Dugu is an inscription master, and I think he's about level 7. Chapter 2234. Aren't we the same? But Master Dugu has never liked you. He'll probably give you attitude if you go ask him for help. Feng Sun gave her a sympathetic look. I'll go. I don't mind the humiliation. He then picked up the book and was about to leave. Feng Wu asked, Where are you going? Feng Sun waved at Feng Wu. Stay here. Master Dugu and Master Zhua are relatives by marriage, and they've always been allies. You've offended the Zhua family, and I don't think the Dugu family will like to see you. So, be a good girl and stay here. Feng Wu asked, How do you know that I can't solve these inscriptions? What? Feng Sun turned around and gave her a strange look. What did you say? Feng Wu said, I can solve the level 7 inscriptions. Feng Sun started laughing. Xiao Wu, I know you're talented, but it doesn't mean that you're good at inscriptions. Feng Wu said, I mean it. Feng Sun said, I know that you can do formations, but you can solve level 5 formations at most, and that corresponds to level 5 inscriptions. Forget it, kiddo. This is serious business. You can brag about your ability when we have the time. Feng Wu was very angry with Feng Sun. Without another word, she grabbed the book from him. Seeing that Feng Wu really was going to give it a try, Feng Sun sighed in resignation. He winked at Xian Yi and shrugged, not taking her seriously at all. The Crown Prince leaned back against the cushion and didn't try to interfere. He only shook his head when Feng Wu picked up the book. Solving inscriptions required the ability to focus and calculate. The girl was too hyperactive to thud. Even Jun Linyuan didn't believe that Feng Wu could do it, but at that moment, she opened the book. Feng Su's eyes widened in astonishment. So did Xian Yi's. Even Jun Linyuan almost spilled his tea. It's done, Feng Wu said casually. Feng Sun said, Feng Wu looked at him in bewilderment. What? Feng Sun said, how did you do it? Those are level 7 inscriptions. Feng Wu said matter-of-factly, didn't I tell you? I've known how to since I was 6. Feng Sun was rendered speechless. The others were equally silent. They had thought that she was just bragging. Feng Sun murmured, I'm dreaming, aren't I? Feng Wu didn't know what to say. That's why, said Jun Linyuan after clearing his throat. What do you mean? Feng Sun asked curiously. Jun Linyuan said, that's why she can enter her cultivation state as soon as she sits down. Feng Sun said, Boss Jun, is that a joke? No one can do that. Feng Wu said, wait, isn't that what you do? Sit down and start cultivating right away. Chapter 2235. A Letter. Feng Sun stared at Feng Wu in astonishment. Don't tell me that you can enter the cultivation state as soon as you sit down. Feng Wu looked bewildered. Can't you? Feng Sun said, of course not. Feng Wu asked, so what is it like for you? She suddenly realized that she hadn't been brought up the same way as everyone else. Feng Sun said, yes, we also sit down with our legs crossed and our eyes closed, but no one can start cultivating right away. We all need to adjust our breathing, clear our minds, and slowly get into the state. It takes an hour at least. Feng Wu said, is it so ceremonial for all of you? Feng Sun said, it's not ceremonial. It's the normal procedure. How else are you supposed to sense spiritual essence? Feng Wu said, but she didn't need any of that. Feng Sun asked, are you telling me that you don't need to do those things? Feng Wu nodded. Not at all. That was a hard blow to Feng Sun. He then turned to Jun Linyuan for help. The Crown Prince shrugged. He could enter the state pretty quickly, but it would still take him 5 minutes. He gave Feng Wu a strange look. The girl had really surprised him. This was the second time already. Who did you learn inscriptions from? He asked her with a brooding look in his eyes. Her past was practically blank. She lived in the imperial capital until she was 8 and then spent the next 5 years in northern border city. Where could she possibly learn inscriptions, let alone level 7 ones? All eyes were on Feng Wu. Feng Wu tried to change the subject. Ahem. Don't you want to know what's hidden in the book? She then opened it. 2 things fell out. They were a letter and a strange-looking black stone. Feng Wu wouldn't have opened the letter if there had been a recipient on the envelope. Since there weren't any names, she had no problems reading it. There was a strange look on her face after she finished. What does it say? Feng Sun wanted to have a look at the letter. Ahem. Feng Wu didn't answer. Instead, she folded the letter and put it back into the envelope. It's a girl's secret and not suitable for boys. Feng Sun was baffled. What secret? The fact that Feng Wu wouldn't show it to him only made him more curious. Since Feng Wu had put the letter away, Feng Sun studied the black stone instead. What's this? He turned the stone this way and that, but couldn't see anything out of the ordinary about it. The stone remained unchanged. Xian Yi shook his head after examining it as well. What is it? Feng Wu asked curiously. Feng Sun said, I have no idea. He wouldn't have hidden it away carefully if it was a useless thing. But what should we do with it? Things from the Dongsang Kingdom are so strange. They seem to want to hide everything and fear that other people will read into them. Feng Wu's eyes lit up. What did you just say? Feng Sun said, they don't want other people to read into them. Feng Wu smacked the table. That's it. Chapter 2236, Untitled. Feng Sun said, huh? Feng Wu asked, the Dongsang Kingdom, what's their specialty? Feng Sun said, inscriptions. Feng Wu said, that's right. They're good at and proud of their inscriptions. That's why they want to put inscriptions on everything to keep them secret. They think that people of the Junwu Empire can't solve the inscriptions. Feng Sun mumbled, we can't. Feng Wu said, too bad for them, they don't know that I'm very good at inscriptions as well. So, bring it on. Feng Sun rubbed her head. I know. You can do level 7 inscriptions, and that's great. But there are higher levels. Feng Wu said proudly, but I could do them when I was 6. Feng Sun said, sure you can. But if that's the case, why are you still at level 7 now? Feng Wu said, you said that on purpose, didn't you? If her beautiful master hadn't suddenly fallen into a coma, she wouldn't have remained at the same level after so many years. Feng Sun said, when are we going to find that list? Without the list or any leads, we won't be able to solve the case. I heard that a war is going to break out in the north. Feng Wu frowned. What do you mean? Feng Sun said, my father is stationed on the northern border, and recently, his generals have been transferred to the peace grassland that's slightly to the east. Do you know where that is? It's the grassland which borders our empire and the Dongsang kingdom. The two sides have had skirmishes in the past few years, but the battles have mostly taken place on the peace grassland. That's why the common people know little about it. Feng Wu looked perplexed. Feng Sun said, by the looks of it, the battles have been growing. The crown prince had been reading in bed. He glanced at Feng Sun when he heard that. Feng Sun immediately took the hint. That was confidential information limited to the intelligence department. He should stop talking about it. Anyway, we should find that list ASAP. I can't bring myself to think about spies among us while our soldiers fight on the front line. That's why His Majesty is so keen about this matter. Feng Wu nodded. The revival list wouldn't affect the empire so much in peaceful times. But once war broke out, the spies could do great damage if they infiltrated the armies. The revival list, Feng Wu murmured. At that moment, an image appeared on the wall. Feng Wu recognized it right away. It came from something that worked like a projector. Feng Sun and the others all jumped. What was that? How did you do it? They all looked at Feng Wu. Feng Wu looked from the stone to Feng Sun. I solved the inscriptions. That's all. Feng Sun was speechless. It seemed that if one didn't know inscriptions, they couldn't get anywhere nowadays. Wait, this person looks a lot like the leader of the Mars team. Feng Wu stared at the image on the wall. There's his profile on the right, from his name and cultivation level to the techniques he knows. Why does he think it's a good idea to carry this around? Chapter 2237, Untitled. 10 seconds later, the image disappeared, as if it had been burned up. Burned after reading? Feng Wu cleared her throat. That's neat. Burned after reading? That's very precise. The crown prince liked the way Feng Wu put it. Feng Wu said, isn't this stone our top priority now? Why do I feel that it contains the so-called revival list? Feng Sun asked, really? Feng Wu said, we'll know once we see more. The stone worked like a remote control. Every time she tapped it, there was a new image on the wall along with that person's profile. The descriptions were all thousands of words long, and the image scrolled down automatically. Each image only lasted for 10 seconds before it disappeared for good. Feng Sun was a very smart man, but he couldn't follow the speed after the third person. Just then they heard footsteps outside. His Majesty the Emperor has arrived. Hearing that Jun Linyuan had fallen ill, Emperor Wu came to see him. While he was here, he was going to question Feng Wu about the revival list. However, he walked into the room only to find everyone staring at the wall. It was as if they were afraid of missing something. Both Jun Linyuan and Feng Wu kept their eyes on the wall. So did Xian Yi and even Feng Sun, who was the most active of them all. Emperor Wu lost his temper right away. He was the emperor. How could they ignore him like this? Ahem. He cleared his throat. Your Majesty, Your Majesty, Your Majesty. Although everyone greeted him, no one turned their heads. They all stared at the wall for fear of missing any bit of information. Feng Wu was the only one who spared a second to look over her shoulders and say, Your Majesty, you're here. She immediately turned back to stare at the wall. Emperor Wu didn't know what to say. He was furious. He wasn't alone. Ran Mil, his current favorite concubine, was with him. These people had just humiliated him. He was about to lose his temper when Feng Wu beckoned him over. "Your Majesty, come here please." Emperor Wu couldn't believe his ears. What did she say? He was an emperor. No one could order him around like that. It was an insult. Before he could say anything, Feng Wu said, "Your Majesty, what are you waiting for? This is the revival list of the Dongsang Kingdom." After saying that, Feng Wu went back to looking at the image on the wall. Apart from Feng Wu and her friends, a group of young eunuchs was also in front of the wall. They were all busy making notes with sweat rolling down their faces. The revival list? Emperor Wu walked up to Feng Wu. She was standing at the best angle. Emperor Wu saw the images and read the descriptions. That indeed looked like the revival list. Chapter 2238, Untitled. Slow it down. It's scrolling so fast. At his age, Emperor Wu's eyesight wasn't as good, and all the words looked like flying insects. Feng Wu kept her gaze on the wall as she said in frustration, "Your Majesty, we wouldn't be so busy if we could slow it down." Emperor Wu was speechless. He then said in frustration, "Why is it only showing each person for 10 seconds? Scroll it back. I'd like to take another look." Feng Wu said, "Your Majesty, this thing only scrolls down. The earlier information is already gone. We can't stop it once it starts rolling." Emperor Wu said, "What?" Seeing that Emperor Wu was about to babble on, Feng Wu snapped, "Your Majesty, just tell your eunuchs to start transcribing. We'll lose our lead on a spy if we miss even one of the images. We don't want that to happen." Leaving out a spy might not be a big deal for Emperor Wu, but Feng Wu needed every name for her 10th trial. Everyone on that revival list had to die. Feng Wu couldn't afford any mistakes. "Do as she says." Emperor Wu forgot about his frustration and gave the order. Whoosh! The eunuchs wrote so fast that their hands didn't feel like theirs anymore. Feng Wu sighed inwardly. The Dongsang Kingdom was so cunning. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to remember everything at this speed. Even Feng Wu felt a little overwhelmed. Gosh! Feng Wu missed her life in the modern world now. Back then, she didn't need to work so hard to remember everything. All she needed was to take out her phone and start recording. Ugh! She smacked her head. How could she forget about such an important thing? She had the spiritual fossil stone. She could record things with the stone. Although it wasn't as convenient as a mobile phone, it would still work. While everyone else was staring at the wall, Feng Wu quietly took out the stone and started recording from inside her sleeve. Now that things had become much easier, she had time to observe the others. Feng Sun was scratching his head and about to snap. Xian Yi looked overwhelmed. Emperor Wu looked like he was about to give up. Feng Wu then glanced at Ranmil, who was next to Emperor Wu. As Emperor Wu's favorite woman at the moment, Ranmil didn't try to record the information on the wall. Instead, she clenched her fists and looked very nervous. She looked like she was worried that her secret was going to be exposed. What secret? Feng Wu narrowed her eyes. Did Ranmil's secret have something to do with the Dongsang Kingdom? Ranmil was a very careful person, but she was so anxious now that she didn't realize that Feng Wu was looking at her. That was interesting. Since each image only lasted for 10 seconds, it didn't take a long time to show them all. It was over in less than 15 minutes. Crack! The black stone in Feng Wu's hand vibrated and began to crack. Soon, it turned into powder. The last image disappeared at the same time. Chapter 2239, Untitled. Many people let out a sigh of relief. Finally! Feng Sun looked over his shoulder and saw a second team of eunuchs writing. The first team was already exhausted. Feng Sun was rendered speechless. He wasn't much better either. All the brain work had drained him, and he could barely stand up. Feng Wu helped him sit down on the side. Feng Sun suddenly cried out in despair. Feng Wu looked at him in confusion. Feng Sun shouted, "What should I do now? I can't remember anything I saw. Apart from the last image, I can't recall anything. I'm so stupid." Feng Wu said, "Don't worry about it. Look, So many people were recording it. We won't miss much. Plus, she still had her spiritual fossil stone. The Dongsang kingdom is very cunning. Feng Sun snorted. 10 seconds an image. That was so difficult. If we didn't have so many people to help us, we would never be able to remember it all. However, we don't know what we have yet. Let's gather everything first. Feng Wu asked the eunuchs to summarize everything they had so that they would have something for Emperor Wu. But it wasn't as satisfying as they had expected. That was because there were over 20 of them, and this is all you have? A lot of it are repeats. Feng Wu shook her head. There are no names and only 10 pictures. The last 3 are a mess. You can't even see their faces. Feng Wu rubbed her forehead. She hadn't realized that ordinary people were so limited in their abilities. Feng Sun smiled bitterly. Xiao Wu, you're asking too much. They only had 10 seconds for each image, and that was extremely hard. Consort Ranmil seemed relieved, and she finally had time to mock Feng Wu. Why are you blaming other people? How about you? How many names did you memorize? Ranmil sneered at Feng Wu. You're clearly a hypocrite. Emperor Wu flipped through the names on the revival list. He noticed that the names were divided into 7 different teams. Many of them had a note that said dead. The eunuchs weren't completely idiots. For the dead ones, they knew that they only needed to give a name. But for the surviving ones, they only managed to write down the first and last sentences of the personal information. Even then, they had only recorded 13 people. Emperor Wu wanted to scold them, but he hadn't been much better and probably would have done a worse job. Despite his disappointment, he couldn't say anything. Hearing what Ranmil said, Emperor Wu asked Feng Wu, "Are you sure that's everyone on the revival list?" Feng Wu nodded. Yes. Emperor Wu asked, "How many names did you memorize?" Ranmil gloated. She decided that Feng Wu couldn't affect anything since Ranmil herself was the most influential woman in the empire right now. Feng Wu said, "Consort Ranmil seems very happy. How many names did you memorize?" Chapter 2240, Untitled. Consort Ranmil, how much information did you memorize? Feng Wu looked at her with a smile. Ranmil said arrogantly, "More than you." Feng Wu narrowed her eyes and came up with a plan. She wanted to test Ranmil to see if she really had connections with the Dongsang kingdom. At that thought, Feng Wu picked up the notebook that had everyone's notes in it and glanced at Ranmil. Who should go first? You or me? Ranmil had her own plan. She smirked and said, "I can remember more than you. If I go first, you won't have anything to write down." Feng Wu said, "Is that so? In that case, I'll start first, Consort Ranmil." Ranmil gritted her teeth. She felt that Feng Wu was deliberately calling her to Consort Ranmil in front of Jun Linyuan. Feng Wu then started filling in the gaps in the notes. She could fill in all the blanks, but why should she? She could keep the completed list to herself. Why should she share it with everyone else? Therefore, she pretended she was having a difficult time remembering everything. She left out the dead ones. Of the surviving 30 or so people, only a dozen or so had names. Feng Wu used green ink. She scratched her head when she reached the 14th man and eventually put down her pen. That isn't much. Ranmil flipped through the pages. Feng Wu, aren't you supposed to have a very good memory? You've written down so little. Feng Sun was equally perplexed. It was normal that he couldn't remember much, but if Feng Wu had really learned level 7 inscriptions when she was 6, she should have an excellent memory. She should be able to remember much more. Had she held back the information? Feng Wu remained calm despite Ranmil's mocking. She said, "Well, I had a difficult battle up on the mountain and almost died. I haven't fully recovered yet. That's why I can't remember much." That was quite impressive, fighting a spiritual king. "I didn't expect to see you come back alive," Ranmil said casually. Feng Wu screamed inwardly. How did Ranmil know that? She turned to Feng Sun, who shook his head in bewilderment. He and Xian Yi had followed Feng Wu here after they left the mountain. He hadn't had time to tell anyone about the battle. Ran Mil gave Feng Wu one more glance without saying another word. What was she supposed to say? Praise Feng Wu for her fast improvement? Of course she would never do that. Ran Mil spared no effort in trying to discourage Feng Wu. She took the notebook and started writing in purple ink. Her pupils contracted when she saw the 13th person. She remembered that the man was called Zhou Dapeng, and he was a spy who worked in the intelligence department. He was an expert assassin with a flame-shaped birthmark on his back. Chapter 2241, Untitled. But Zhou Dapeng's name was wrong in the record, and so were his features. The flame-shaped birthmark had become a mole. It was written in green ink, indicating that it was Feng Wu who had put this down. Ran Mil hesitated, wondering if she should correct the record. She couldn't make up her mind. If she didn't do anything, Zhou Dapeng would definitely be caught. She was practically on the Dongsang Kingdom's side, and she couldn't let that happen. Moreover, she could use this opportunity to laugh at Feng Wu. However, she didn't know everything. Feng Wu had made the mistake on purpose. It was a trap for Ran Mil. As long as Ran Mil hesitated, it would mean that she had a guilty conscience. Feng Wu had already noticed Ran Mil's hesitation. In the end, Ran Mil made the decision to correct Zhou Dapeng's name in the end. She rolled her eyes at Feng Wu and said, "You're so hopeless. This man is called Zhou Dapeng, and he has a flame-shaped birthmark." Feng Wu frowned. "Are you sure?" Ran Mil said, "Of course I am. Have someone look it up if you like. There must be a man called Zhou Dapeng in the intelligence department. Stop bragging about your memory already." She then threw aside her pen and said arrogantly, "I'm done." She glanced at Jun Linyuan as she spoke. She wanted to show Jun Linyuan who the really smart girl was. And she wanted Jun Linyuan to admit that giving up her was the worst decision he had ever made. Emperor Wu took the notebook and frowned. "Is that all? There's only detailed information on 15 people here." Ran Mil said in a coquettish manner, "Your Majesty, the images move too fast. I've already done a very good job." Emperor Wu nodded. Ran Mil tugged at his sleeve and said, "Your Majesty, who do you think is better, me or Feng Wu?" Emperor Wu said, "Well?" Ran Mil said, "Your Majesty, it's quite easy to tell. The information is written in 2 colors. Which do you think is more important? The green words or the purple ones?" The purple notes outshone the green ones in both their quantity and significance. Emperor Wu immediately said, "The purple notes, of course." "Yes." Ran Mil was pleased. She had only given over a dozen names out, and reckoned that the man in black could afford to lose them. "Your Majesty, I won. May I have that now?" Ran Mil pointed at a seal which hung on Emperor Wu's belt. It was the Emperor's seal, and holding it was equivalent to having the Emperor around. That was to say, the holder of the seal could do pretty much anything in the Junwo Empire, as long as they didn't commit some serious crime. Emperor Wu hesitated, so Ran Mil said, "Your Majesty, I worked so hard to memorize everything that I have a headache. I did a good job, didn't I? There are a lot of spies." Chapter 2242, Untitled. Emperor Wu agreed that Consort Ran Mil had done a good job, but he couldn't make it look so easy. For one, if he just let her have it, she might not cherish it. For another, he had to appear fair. Therefore, Emperor Wu said, "I was going to give this seal to the winner of the competition. I have to be fair." The corner of Feng Sun's mouth twitched. If it was so fair, why didn't he say so before the competition started? He obviously wanted to give Ran Mil that seal. Emperor Wu took the seal from his belt and was about to give it to Ran Mil. Feng Sun was anxious. Was Feng Wu going to let her take the seal just like that? It was such an important seal. If the spy incident hadn't happened, Ran Mil could have all the seals she wanted, but now that Feng Wu already knew that Ran Mil had connections with the Dongsang Kingdom, she couldn't let that happen. Just then, Feng Wu glanced at Ran Mil and said, "Why do I feel that I can remember better now?" Emperor Wu stopped moving. Feng Wu had already taken the notebook and started writing in green ink again. Whoosh! Soon she filled another 10 pages. There was a person on each page. Ranmil saw that Feng Wu was writing nonstop, and seemed very confident in what she was writing. All they could hear was the sound of turning pages. Ranmil felt as if someone had slapped her in the face. Emperor Wu had the same feeling. That's all I can remember. Feng Wu put down her pen and gave the notebook to Emperor Wu. She had come up with information on more than 15 people. There were over 30 people in total now. That was to say, there was information on all the surviving members. You made that up? Ranmil stared at Feng Wu. She looked at the expression on Emperor Wu's face before she stared at Feng Wu. How can you remember so much? You filled in the blanks and provided us with 18 more names. You can't remember them all. Feng Wu smiled at Ranmil. Just because you can do it doesn't mean other people can't. I don't believe you. Ranmil took Emperor Wu's hand and said, I have the best memory, and I could only remember a little over 10 names. She can't have done better than me. Emperor Wu stared at Feng Wu and asked in an intimidating tone, What's going on here? Feng Wu said, My memory just came back to me. Emperor Wu said, Do you think I'll believe that? Feng Wu said, Your Majesty is as wise as expected. Nothing gets past you. Ranmil had been eyeing that seal for a very long time, so she wouldn't give up easily. Feng Wu, you're giving false information. Do you know how serious the consequences are? Chapter 2243, Untitled. They're spies of the Dongsang Kingdom, and the safety of the empire is on the line. Did you give up your loyalty just because you were hurt before? I'm fine with you slacking off on normal days, but how can you do that in a critical moment like this? Feng Wu said, I'm not slacking off. Ranmil said, You gave us false information. Although I didn't memorize everything, I saw it all, and I'm sure that you're not telling the truth. Feng Wu said, I see that Consort Ranmil is very sure of herself. Ranmil said, I'm proud of my memory. Feng Wu said, In that case, please see for yourself. She then took out the spiritual fossil stone, activated it, and projected the recording onto the wall. It was none other than the revival list from before. Everyone was shocked. Feng Sun wondered why he hadn't thought of that before. Xianyi felt that all his efforts had been for nothing. Emperor Wu realized that the girl had been tricking them all along. Jun Linyuan's eyes twinkled. The girl had surprised him yet again. You, Ranmil looked like she had seen a ghost. You have a spiritual fossil stone. You recorded it. That's cheating. Yes, you cheated. Ranmil stared at Feng Wu. You didn't memorize it yourself. Feng Wu said, In terms of what we're doing here, which is more important, the means or the result? Ranmil was rendered speechless. The spiritual fossil stone had recorded the images, and they would soon see if Feng Wu was telling the truth. Emperor Wu didn't know what to say. The girl still remembered to use the spiritual fossil stone when everything was happening so fast. What a genius! Feng Wu said, Your Majesty, who do you think has won, me or Consort Ranmil? Naturally, Emperor Wu wanted Consort Ranmil to win, but Feng Wu was the actual winner. Emperor Wu didn't know what to say. He had been wanting to give that seal to Consort Ranmil but hadn't found a chance. It had never occurred to him that the seal would go to Feng Wu one day. However, while Emperor Wu tried to downplay the whole thing, Jun Linyuan spoke. Give Feng Wu the seal, he said coldly. Emperor Wu wanted to smack him in the head. Had he forgotten whose son he was? But everyone was watching, and Emperor Wu couldn't go back on his word. He stared at Feng Wu instead. If Feng Wu was smart enough, she should turn down the offer. However, Feng Wu smiled at Emperor Wu and asked, Really? I can have the seal? Emperor Wu glared at her. That girl was as bad as Jun Linyuan. But as an emperor, he had to keep his word. He took off the seal and tossed it at Feng Wu with a warning. If you dare abuse this privilege, I'll take it back. Chapter 2244, Untitled. Yes, of course. Thank you, Your Majesty. Feng Wu beamed at him. Ranmil was so angry that she thought she was going to lose her mind. How could he do that? She was the one who had suggested using the seal as the stakes. Giving it to Feng Wu was like slapping her in the face. And everyone was watching. What would Jun Linyuan think of her? The seal wasn't what she wanted the most. She wanted Jun Linyuan to regret it. She wanted Jun Linyuan to regret choosing Feng Wu over her. Ranmil still tugged at Emperor Wu's sleeve. Emperor Wu took Ranmil's hand and comforted her. I'll give you something else, I promise. But Ranmil only wanted to save face in front of Feng Wu. Before she could think of anything, they heard footsteps outside. It was none other than Lady Northern Feng Sun's mother. Xiao Wu. She was thrilled to see Feng Wu and couldn't stop looking her up and down. Feng Wu smiled and said, "Why are you so worried about me?" After making sure that everything was fine with Feng Wu, Lady Northern Feng heaved a sigh of relief. Xiao Wu, I was so scared. I thought my heart was going to stop when you fought that spiritual king. I'm so glad to see you back. Did His Royal Highness save you? Emperor Wu and the others looked at Feng Wu as well. They also wanted to know how Feng Wu had gotten away from the spiritual king. But Feng Wu was even more curious. You all know about the battle. She had thought that no one would know. Ranmil was going to have a headache. She had been so excited about defeating Feng Wu, but now, Feng Wu had stolen the spotlight again. She remembered that Feng Wu had risen by a whole stage and didn't want to hear about it anymore. Your Majesty, I have a headache. Ranmil took Emperor Wu's hand and wanted to lead him away. But Feng Wu wouldn't let that happen. She had already started talking. Consort Ranmil mentioned my battle against the spiritual king as well, but I don't recall seeing anyone around. Why does it seem that everyone knows about it? Consort Ranmil didn't tell me why. Is it some sort of secret? Lady Northern Feng took Feng Wu's hand and smiled. Speaking of that, we have Consort Ranmil to thank. Ranmil didn't want to hear another word about it. Somehow, Lady Northern Feng just wouldn't stop talking. Xiao Wu, Consort Ranmil is so modest. She paid a big price for you. You really should thank her properly. Feng Wu asked, really? What did Consort Ranmil do for me? Lady Northern Feng immediately told Feng Wu everything about how Ranmil had located her with the crystal ball. What? Feng Wu's stomach lurched. That was to say, they had seen everything, including her successive advancements. Chapter 2245, Untitled. So, you all know that Feng Wu cleared her throat, that I've advanced a few levels? Lady Northern Feng was excited to hear the question. She took Feng Wu's hand and said, Xiao Wu, you're so amazing. How did you do that? You were a level 7 spiritual elder when you entered the mountain, but you're now a level 7 spiritual lord after you returned. That's incredible. Ranmil clenched her fists. Why wouldn't this woman stop talking? She didn't want to hear about it anymore. Feng Sun stared at his mother in disbelief. What? Xiao Wu is a level 7 spiritual lord. Lady Northern Feng said, that's right. We all saw it. Master Dugu, Lord Mu, Her Majesty the Empress Dowager, His Majesty, Empress Dugu, Consort Ranmil, and Master Feng were all there. Don't Master Zhua and Master Dugu go everywhere together? Wasn't Master Zhua there? Feng Wu kept her eyes on Ranmil when she asked the question. However, Ranmil didn't react to Master Zhua's name when it was mentioned. That was to say, she hadn't been working with him. So, there was only one candidate left. The enemies they were fighting were from the Dongsang Kingdom and the Zhua family. And the only major force left was. Feng Wu had suspected Ranmil because of the things she had done before. Why would Ranmil locate Feng Wu? She couldn't have wanted to show everyone Feng Wu's glorious moment. She had done so probably because she believed that Feng Wu was going to be killed and wanted everyone to see it. That was why she used everything in her power to broadcast the battle. At that thought, Feng Wu smiled at Ranmil and said, Thank you, Consort Ranmil. Otherwise, they wouldn't have known about my new cultivation level. Ranmil gritted her teeth. Feng Sun was agitated. Xiao Wu is already a level 7 spiritual lord. Really? Xiao Wu, you're going to surpass me. I'm the big brother. How am I going to protect my little sister if I'm the weaker one? He buried his face in his hands. Xian Yi had an indescribable look on his face as well. Even he found Feng Wu's progress incredible. He was more advanced than Feng Sun, but not by much. Mom, I want to go to the northern border. I want to train myself on the battlefield. Feng Sun said loudly to his mother. Lady Northern Feng smacked him in the forehead. You're my only son, and your father is already doing all the fighting on the front line. You're not going anywhere. Feng Sun darted away. No one knew what was going on in his head. Lady Northern Feng's intervention successfully chased Ran Mil away. She returned to her tent. While Emperor Wu was discussing how to eliminate the spies with his officials, a man in black entered her tent without making a sound. Ran Mil was brushing her hair in front of the mirror. Chapter 2246, Untitled. As usual, Qing Chao had been knocked unconscious. Seeing her maid lying motionlessly on the floor, Ran Mil said grumpily, "Can't you use a gentler method?" The man in black was as taciturn as always. He didn't reply to Ran Mil's protest and only looked at her with cold eyes. "You're doomed." Ran Mil sneered at him. The man had been threatening her for a long time. After the frustrating experience with Feng Wu, Ran Mil decided to lash out at the man. The man had a black scarf over his face and a hood over his head. His cold eyes were the only part of his face that was exposed. Ran Mil said mockingly, "Someone has found your revival list." The man narrowed his eyes. "Who?" Ran Mil had brought up the subject because she wanted to lead the man to Feng Wu. She said matter-of-factly, "Who do you think?" "It's Feng Wu, obviously. You have no idea how capable she is. She found this little black stone that could project images onto the wall, and we all saw the information of different people, but it scrolled down so fast and self-destructed at the end. We weren't able to remember much, but Feng Wu isn't like us. She recorded everything with the spiritual fossil stone before writing them down. That was how she was able to get everyone's names." The man's eyes glinted coldly. Ran Mil sighed. "Well, His Majesty already knows the list, and he's coming up with a plan to catch those people as we speak." The man gave Ran Mil one last glance before he left without another word. Ran Mil smiled. Did the man think that she would put up with him forever? Did Feng Wu think that she could show off her little talent just like that? The two of them could fight to the death. They were 3 days away from the imperial capital, but at Emperor Wu's command, they reached the city in 1 day. Everyone went back home that night. Emperor Wu took over the case after he obtained the list, and Feng Wu was happy for the burden to be lifted from her shoulders. She could just wait to see the outcome. Jun Linyuan wanted to take Feng Wu back to his residence, but Feng Wu didn't want to go. Now that the 9th trial was finished, Feng Wu couldn't stay far away enough from the crown prince. As a result, His Royal Highness had been quite grumpy recently. Feng Wu missed her home and all her family members. Chaoga had wanted to go back home with Feng Wu, but her father wouldn't let her, so Feng Wu let her go back to solve her own issues first. Being a level 7 spiritual elder, Chaoga could handle a lot of things on her own. If her father knew Chaoga's capability now, he would probably regret having helped his second wife chase Chaoga away. Feng Wu and Qiuling each rode a horse and headed back home. The one that Feng Wu was riding was the blood seahorse that she had tamed in the grassland. Chapter 2247, Untitled. The horse had quite a story. It used to be Zhou Qingwan's ride before it was abandoned. Feng Wu then tamed it, but it went missing for a while. To her surprise, Jun Linyuan brought it back and gave it to her before she went back home. Feng Wu would be lying if she said that she wasn't moved. Having spent some time together, Feng Wu and Jun Linyuan were already quite familiar with each other. They might not be lovers, but they were at least friends. That was what Feng Wu believed. Feng Wu smiled at Jun Linyuan before she rode away. She rode off, laughing wholeheartedly. After this trip to the grassland, Qiuling was no longer who she used to be. Since she was recognized as a genius now, Emperor Wu treated her much better. Gao had arranged a horse for her already. Feng Yanfeng and his family could only go back home all crammed together in a narrow carriage. Feng Yanfeng kept his silence while his wife sulked. She had been holding a grudge against Feng Wu over Feng Lu's death, but because she hadn't dealt with Feng Wu in the past few days, no one had realized it. How can that girl still be laughing? If Lu was still alive, she would be so much prettier. She's laughing, but my daughter will never come back. Lady Wang started crying. Feng Yanfeng remained silent with his dark face. Feng Sang clenched her fists. Mother, don't worry. I'll work very hard and take revenge for Lu. I'll kill Feng Wu. Feng Yiran also nodded. That's right, Mother. Feng Wu won't be running around for much longer. We'll never forget what she has done. Lady Wang nodded. Shut up. Feng Yanfeng shouted so loudly that he almost startled the horse. Luckily, the groom was deaf and couldn't hear them. Lady Wang stopped crying and stared at Feng Yanfeng. Feng Yanfeng pointed at them. You idiots! Don't you have eyes? Can't you see how formidable Feng Wu is now? How are you going to kill her? Lady Wang wouldn't have it. What about Lu? Did she die for nothing? She had it coming. Feng Yanfeng finally said something that was reasonable. She picked the right team, Feng Wu's team, at first, but what did she do? She switched to Ranmil's side. Lady Wang said, so what? It was her right to choose. Feng Yanfeng said, everyone has to take responsibility for their own choices. Feng Lu made her choice, so she had to live with the consequences when that team failed. Lady Wang said, but she was only 13. She didn't understand anything. Feng Yanfeng said, she went to compete for the seed of the spirit source. Of course she knew the risks. Lady Wang said, but everyone else in that team survived. Ranmil was the team leader, and she's still alive. Why did my daughter have to die? Feng Wu drove her to her death. Feng Yanfeng said, Feng Wu pushed Ranmil even harder, but what did Ranmil do? Chapter 2248, Untitled. A wise man submits to fate, and she should have known better. She should have paid the price as long as it could keep her alive. There's always a chance to get revenge. Look at Consort Ranmil. She's His Majesty's favorite now. Lady Wang said, but Lu was Feng Wu's cousin. They were family. How could Feng Wu be so heartless? Smack. Feng Yanfeng slapped her hard in the face. Both Feng Yiran and Feng Sang were astonished. Lady Wang burst into tears. You hit me. You hit me for that girl, the girl who killed your daughter. Feng Yanfeng. I hate you. Feng Yanfeng picked up the teapot and poured the tea over her head as she charged at him. Wake up. Do you think you own this world? Do you think everyone has to do your bidding? Do you think people will just endure what you do to them and never take revenge? You're so easy to see through. Wake up. This world values martial prowess above everything else. Do you think Xiao Wu doesn't know what you did to her 5 years ago? Of course she knows that Feng Lu was her cousin. Why do you think she killed Feng Lu, regardless of the consequences? Because she hates us. She hates us for everything we did 5 years ago. She hated Feng Lu for trying to kill her the whole time. She hates you for harming her mother. She killed Feng Lu because she wanted to warn us not to mess with her. She won't hesitate to kill us if we make her angry. She wouldn't dare, said Lady Wang. Feng Yanfeng found his wife ridiculous. She's backed by His Royal Highness and Northern Feng Mansion. She herself is also incredibly capable. I suppose that none of you know her real capability. I do. She's a level 7 spiritual elder, said Feng Sang. Yes, that's quite impressive, but it's not unachievable. A level 7 spiritual elder? Feng Yanfeng looked at his daughter as if she was a complete idiot. Do you still think that way? Father? Feng Sang looked at Feng Yanfeng in confusion. Feng Yanfeng said, how stupid are you? Feng Sang didn't understand the look in her father's eyes. It was a mixture of jealousy, hatred, and smugness. How strange. Feng Yanfeng waved them off. Forget it. It'll only discourage you. If they were told that Feng Wu was already a level 7 spiritual lord, they would probably feel utterly defeated. They were all of a similar age, but Feng Wu was so much better than they were. Feng Yanfeng was very disappointed. His son thought so highly of himself, but he was only a spiritual grandmaster now. And his proud daughter, who thought herself so efficient, was a mere spiritual grandmaster as well. Even Qiuling is better than you. How are you going to avenge your sister? Just let it go, Feng Yanfeng said in resignation. Chapter 2249, Untitled. Feng Yanfeng had been filled with despair ever since he learned that Feng Wu had risen to become a level 7 spiritual lord. If he knew that Feng Wu was already a level 9 spiritual lord, he would probably fall to his knees on the ground. Although his tantrum forced Lady Wang to calm down, it was impossible to make her drop the idea of taking revenge. Feng Wu had no idea what was going on with Feng Yanfeng's family. She was busy getting back home. Instead of entering through the front gate, she rode her horse and jumped over the wall. Thump! Blood Seahorse landed steadily in the courtyard. The door to Fallen Star Yard was half open, and she could hear voices inside. Sister-in-law, you signed it yourself. You can't deny it now. It was a familiar voice. Granny Zhao said angrily, Lady Gu, you're frightening my lady. She hasn't agreed to anything. Please leave. Lady Gu? As in the wife of Feng Wu's third uncle. She remembered that her uncle had gone to work in a local office and had taken his family with him. Had they come back to the imperial capital? Lady Gu was smiling, but her tone was threatening. Sister-in-law, this is your signature. If you still want to deny it, I don't mind taking this to court. Uncle Qiu and Granny Zhao shielded the lady with their own bodies. Lady Gu, please leave. Lady Gu said, Granny Zhao, Uncle Qiu, once my sister-in-law remarries, why don't you come and work for me? Feng Wu was furious. How dare she say such a thing? Qiuling wanted to charge into the courtyard, but Feng Wu stopped her. She wanted to hear Lady Gu's plan. Granny Zhao said, Lady Gu, my lady isn't marrying anyone. Lady Gu smirked. That's not for her to decide. With that face of hers, it'll be a great waste if she just stays here in this courtyard. The Lord of Yongxing Manor doesn't mind her past and wants to take her after his first wife's death. She has to grab this chance before it goes away. Lady Gu didn't try to keep it from the beautiful lady. She treated her as a dimwit. Feng Wu looked inside and saw her mother trembling behind Granny Zhao. That woman was frightening her. Uncle Qiu glared at Lady Gu. Lady Gu, please show some respect. When Miss Wu comes back, she won't be pleased if she knows how you've been treating her mother. Uncle Qiu, are you talking about my sister, the good-for-nothing? That was Feng Qi, Lady Gu's daughter. Feng Qi was of the same age as Feng Wu, but they had been treated quite differently when they were little. Well, I do remember my sister. It was very bold of her to come back from northern border city. I see that she doesn't mind people laughing at her. Uncle Qiu and Granny Zhao were furious, but they were only servants and couldn't do anything. But someone took action. And that was Feng Wu's beautiful mother. Only one thing could really affect her, and that was Feng Wu. Xiao Wu was the prettiest girl. Xiao Wu was the most lovely girl. Xiao Wu was the most popular girl. Xiao Wu. Xiao Wu. Chapter 2250, Untitled. The beautiful lady wouldn't hear anything bad about Xiao Wu. Those who did were her enemies, and she would go berserk. As expected. Hearing what Feng Qi said, the beautiful lady was furious. She grabbed a broomstick and smacked it down on Feng Qi's face. Die! In her world, there was no seniority, nor was there right or wrong. She only cared about her Xiao Wu. Die. The beautiful lady started hitting Feng Qi with the broomstick. Feng Qi was frightened. She had never expected her frail-looking aunt to hit her so hard with a broomstick. Feng Qi had been cultivating since she was little and had been learning from a great teacher. Once the initial shock was over, she struck back. However, her guard moved faster. The guard had an unassuming look, but one could tell that he was very capable. He was faster than Feng Qi. He thought that he could easily take down the beautiful lady because he was the most capable person in the courtyard. But he was wrong. He was knocked away. The person kicked him so hard that his ribs were broken, and he felt as if his internal organs had been torn apart. He smashed into the wall, and it shattered at the impact. He pressed his hands to his chest and spat out a mouthful of blood. There were some lumps in his blood. It was obvious that his internal organs had been wrecked. Qingyi, are you all right? Feng Qi ran to his side, her voice full of concern. Qingyi wanted to say something but couldn't make a sound. He wanted to tell his mistress to be careful, but Feng Qi was too furious to care about anything else. She turned around and glared at Qiuling. The attacker wasn't Feng Wu. It was Qiuling, the level 7 spiritual elder. It just wasn't Lady Gu. Granny Zhao and Uncle Qiu were also astonished. How had Qiuling become so capable after the last few months? Meanwhile, Feng Wu ran to her mother. The beautiful lady and the broomstick made an amusing picture, but Feng Wu felt so sorry for her. Mom, it's me. Xiao Wu is back. Feng Wu held her by the waist. Finally, the lady calmed down. She recognized the girl's face. Although she wasn't the prettiest girl in the world, she was still her Xiao Wu. Feng Wu would be speechless if she knew her mother's opinion of her appearance. In other people's eyes, Feng Wu was a stunning girl. Apart from her mother, Feng Wu hadn't met anyone else who was prettier than her. Xiao Wu. The beautiful lady grabbed Feng Wu and wouldn't let go. Feng Wu patted her back and said, Mom, I won't let it happen again. I promise. This time, she had brought back the white fairy. Chapter 2251, Untitled. With the white fairy guarding the courtyard, if anyone tried to invade her home again, they could go to hell. While Feng Wu was placating her mother, Lady Gu and Feng Qi finally recovered from their initial shock. Lady Gu looked from Feng Wu to Qiuling and said, Yeah? You're Xiao Wu. Then who's that? Lady Gu, I'm Qiuling. Lady Gu had seen Qiuling before, but she just couldn't believe it. Because Qiuling had exerted so much power in that kick. Are you really Qiuling? You're so capable now. Lady Gu didn't know how she should treat Qiuling now. It pained Feng Wu to see how scared her mother was. The beautiful lady had fallen ill years ago and had lost both her memory and her cultivation ability. She behaved like a 5-year-old and was frightened by all the fighting. Feng Wu told Qiuling, finish it outside and be quick about it. Having been with Feng Wu for so many years, Qiuling was no longer frightened by a nobody like Lady Gu. All the high-ranking officials in court had spoken to her in person and tried to win her to their side. They had all promised her generous rewards. Qiuling turned down every single one of them, saying that she couldn't leave her mistress. In comparison, Lady Gu was almost too petty for her to handle. Unfortunately, Lady Gu and her daughter didn't know that. They still thought of Qiuling as the little maid she used to be. Qiuling stared at the mother and daughter. You're bothering Miss Wu and my lady. Please come outside. She then headed for the door. Lady Gu was astonished. She looked from Qiuling to Feng Wu and said, Xiao Wu, aren't you going to say something? Did you hear what your maid said? How can a maid offend us? Shut up. Feng Wu frowned. Seeing the look on her face, Qiuling picked up Lady Gu and threw her over the wall. Thump. Lady Gu landed on the other side of the wall. Feng Qi was shocked. What was going on? How could this maid? Feng Wu, are you an idiot? How could you let a maid? Stop talking, said Feng Wu. Qiuling moved again. Thump. This time, Feng Qi and Qingyi were thrown out. Seeing the cold look in Qiuling's eyes, Lady Gu's servants all scattered and ran off. Qiuling shut the front gate and shook her head when she saw the collapsed wall. Uncle Qiu, do we have any bricks? The crowd couldn't believe their ears. With what had happened, Qiuling only cared about repairing the wall. That was unbelievable. Let's go to the elders. Someone has to keep her under control. Lady Gu said furiously. They couldn't do anything to Chioling, but the family could. At the same time, Uncle Chio was equally shocked. Chioling? He didn't know what to say. That was so incredible. Chapter 2252, Untitled. Chioling had really thrown those people out. They were Lady Gu and her daughter. Chioling, how could you? Uncle Chio stomped his foot. They'll come back. You've made so much trouble for Miss Wu and Our Lady. Chioling wanted to speak, but Uncle Chio wouldn't let her. By then, Feng Wu had calmed her mother down and put her to bed. She came back out to see Uncle Chio scolding Chioling, so she said, Uncle Chio, Chioling did nothing wrong. I told her to do that. Uncle Chio rolled his eyes at her. I'm not blind. I can see that. Feng Wu and Chioling chuckled. Uncle Chio glared at Chioling. Stop laughing. Do you know how much trouble you've caused? We should keep a low profile and slowly build up our strength. Uncle Chio, Feng Wu cut him off. Chioling is a level 7 spiritual elder now. Uncle Chio said, even so, she's still... Miss Wu, what did you just say? Chioling is a level 7 spiritual grandmaster now? Feng Wu laughed. No, she's much better than that. She's a level 7 spiritual elder. What? Uncle Chio was astonished. Then isn't she more capable than you? How's that even possible? She only took a trip to the grassland. Miss Wu, are you making fun of me? Feng Wu shrugged. You saw it yourself. Chioling is so amazing. She threw those people out as if they were only sacks of rice. Miss Wu, Chioling blushed. Uncle Chio was thrilled. A level 7 spiritual elder. Oh my God. Uncle Chio was so excited that his mouth twitched. If that's the case, we don't have to be so humble anymore. Feng Wu was moved by his excitement. In the years that Feng Wu had been without her cultivation ability, it was Uncle Chio who had protected the family. But he wasn't very capable himself either. Feng Wu knew how hard it had been for him. Miss Wu, Chioling is a level 7 spiritual elder now, so you better work hard, Uncle Chio encouraged Feng Wu. You need to keep up with her. Chioling chuckled. Uncle Chio stared at her. Yes, you're so amazing now. Even so, you still have to serve Miss Wu properly. Chioling said, of course. Feng Wu said, Uncle Chio, I won't be able to make any more progress for a while, but don't worry. Uncle Chio asked, why? Feng Wu said, I've made so many advancements recently that my foundation isn't as solid as before. I need to work on that first before I make any more breakthroughs. Otherwise, I'll have a lot of trouble in the future. Uncle Chio didn't understand everything she said, but he heard the many advancements bit. So many advancements? Miss Wu, have you become a level 7 spiritual elder as well? He asked curiously. Chioling chuckled. What are you talking about? Miss Wu is a spiritual lord now. That you're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.